Is it too late to make a difference here, as Ukraine has really lost considerable leverage in the last couple of months, and Russia launched, major strikes against Iranian infrastructure and energy supplies over the weekend?
Well, look, the situation's grim for the Ukrainians. They're fighting literally for their survival against a mass Russian criminal offensive. The Russians are targeting civilian infrastructure. They're using DPICM munitions against civilian targets. They brought in what could turn out to be 100,000 North Koreans eventually. They're using Iranian-produced drones. China's giving them some minimal support. So it's a very difficult situation. I think you could argue that the Biden administration is closing hours, is adding one small factor that might help in the negotiations to end the war when the Trump administration comes in. And it's also responding, obviously, to the hypocrisy of the Russians. But as you suggest, even though ATACMS is a ferociously effective weapon, a 300-kilometer range, it can start now targeting Russian attack helicopter positions, fixed-wing aircraft, artillery that are attacking Ukraine. Even though it has military value, it's too little, too late.
And John Brennan, let's talk about North Korea and the resources there. North Korea could provide, as Barry McCaffrey just said, endless supplies of personnel to back up Russia.
Well, they've already supplied a fair amount of munitions and weapon systems to Russia since Russian stocks have run short. But it's these troops now. 10,000 supposedly have been amassed to launch this counteroffensive in the Kursk region, and many more tens of thousands could in fact show up afterward. So I do think the Biden administration is trying to help the Ukrainians blunt this counteroffensive so that the Ukrainians can hold on to some of this Russian territory in Kursk. Because if there's going to eventually be some type of negotiations, I think the Ukrainians have always hoped that there would be a trade of land for land, so they could agree to get out of the Kursk region if Russia agreed to get out of the eastern portion of Ukraine that they've occupied. But I do think it's a last-ditch effort on the part of the Biden administration to do what they can to be able to provide Ukraine some additional capability where they can strike troop concentrations, weapons depots, munition arsenals, and other areas inside of Russia. And it is rather rich, and as General McCaffrey said, rather the height of hypocrisy, that Russia claims that this is an escalation, while Russia has been escalating this war over the last 2+ years.
And John Brennan and General McCaffrey, before we move on, I also want to ask both of you about NBC News' Courtney Kube reporting over the weekend, and her team, that the new transition team is considering courts martial and reactivating people like General Milley, and also going against all of the generals who are on the ground in Kabul for that admittedly disastrous withdrawal. General McCaffrey, first to you. What is your posture towards court-martialing some of these generals, including 4-stars?
Well, I think legally it's going to go nowhere. There's just no precedent for this. You can bring back retired military personnel who committed a civil crime years ago while they were in active duty. But this is utter nonsense. What isn't utter nonsense is this is a political attack of utmost hypocrisy. Trump ran for office saying, get out of Afghanistan. He reduced the troop presence to 2,500. He negotiated directly with the Taliban. And Biden, in a legitimate political objective, came into office saying he was going to withdraw from Afghanistan. So there are 2,500 troops on the ground. We had to give up the major air base. We were in a bowl around Kabul. The evacuation from a tactical military viewpoint was a brilliant success. I thought it might be Dien Bien Phu. They put 7 battalions on the ground. U.S. Air Force appeared with B-52, B-1 bombers. We got out of there with 100,000 Afghan civilians fleeing with us. So it's just the world turned upside down. I think it's going nowhere, but it's a disaster signal to the armed forces. They're also talking about review boards, vetting the 3- and 4-star flag officers of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, firing the chairman of the JCS. who I might add was promoted to 4 stars by Trump. This is a terrible beginning to an administration.
And John Brennan, there's also lots of reporting, including our own, that the military wanted to keep 2,500 troops there and not shut Bagram as precipitously as it was. And it was the political advisors and the national security advisors and the president himself who said, no, draw down.
Yeah, the U.S. military is one of the most esteemed and respected organizations, I think, worldwide. And it does follow the orders of the civilian leaders of this government. And so they were carrying out the orders. And it was pointed out, it was Donald Trump who first initiated this withdrawal by giving a date certain to the Taliban when U.S. military forces would leave. And U.S. military expressed their concerns. A number of people expressed their concerns. But in good military order, they saluted and they carried out the orders of the commander-in-chief. And they did it to the best of their ability in a very difficult and challenging environment. And so this would be blatant politicization of this civilian control over the U.S. military, which I think would have reverberations, negative reverberations for years to come.
John Brennan, of course, is a former Marine as well as former CIA director. Ashley Parker, there's another aspect of the military, which is what the president-elect has confirmed overnight, is that he wants to carry out what he said he was going to do, the mass deportation, and that means using the military. What about the ripple effects of that?
Well, again, he hasn't explained exactly how this would work, and deporting millions of people in the country is a task that is easier said and promised during a campaign than done. I would point you to his first term when during the campaign he promised what he called a Muslim ban. He came into office and tried to implement that, and what we saw was sort of chaos at the nation's airports and a system that was not ready to handle what he was trying to do. So again, we know that he talked about this on the campaign trail. He just overnight confirmed in a Truth Social post that, yes, he does plan to use the military at the southern border to begin mass deportations. But to know exactly how this would work and what the ramifications would be, we have to see how he actually implements it, which right now is still a bit unclear.
And when the reporters have tried to drill down on this in recent weeks, it's not just the people who have been adjudicated as having done, criminal acts. He's talking about, he's made clear all of them, which is potentially, 20 million people, and with a big impact on our economy, our agricultural and our manufacturing economy, where many of them work.
Right, that's right. There are the impacts on the economy. There are the impacts on the communities. There's just the sheer logistical enormity of what he is proposing. If you look at Project 2025, which was not his plan, but was something that a lot of things he had promised to do or was interested in doing and may use as a blueprint. There was also talk of, when it comes to mass deportations, going to these quote unquote safe spaces. So that would be churches, schools. There's going to be, forget about if he actually successfully carries this out, but even any attempt will just have reverberations and ramifications across the United States in any number of sectors.